Thanks for joining me for another episode of Federal Grants Explained. Today I'm joined by my guest, Mr. Brandon Copeland. Brandon is a former Fiscal Operations Specialist with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, specifically in the Administration for Community Living. He served in that role for 5 years. Brandon is also nationally recognized for his innovative approach to something that we are all familiar with, and we'll explore what that is during our conversation. Be sure to stick around for the full episode. We'll learn about Brandon's role at the Administration for Community Living, how he's connected that important work with people in his family and community, about how he supported state recipients of federal grants, about the choices he was given when the new administration first offered all federal employees 3 options to terminate their employment, how he believes the loss in expertise across the federal landscape will impact the country, and what's next for him and his family. When I recorded the video, my Wi-Fi connection wasn't great, so the video is a bit shaky. Thankfully, the audio is not, so you can still follow along on our amazing conversation. Stick around for my conversation with former federal employee, Brandon Copeland. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Mr. Brandon Copeland. This has been in the works for several months, so I'm so happy to have him here with us now. So we're going to go into Brandon's unbelievable bio. Brandon worked for 5 years as a GS-12 Fiscal Operations Specialist at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. There, he managed multi-million-dollar federal budgets under the Older Americans Act and provided national training and policy guidance on financial compliance for federal grantees across all 50 states and territories. He is a recognized subject matter expert on 2 CFR 200 and 45 CFR 75. I'll be happy to go into what those are. And he's received multiple awards for streamlining grant operations and driving transparency during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that's awesome. I just realized, you were there as the pandemic was happening. So I'm really eager to dig into that as well, Brandon. Beyond his federal career, Brandon is a nationally recognized yoga instructor and community wellness strategist dedicated to reimagining access to wellness for Black and Brown communities. As the founder of Kepara Wellness, and I want to make sure I said that correctly, Brandon created the now celebrated Trap Yoga experience, a culturally resonant fusion of power rocket yoga and hip hop that has introduced over 25,000 people to yoga in spaces that feel like home. And that's awesome. He is a Howard University graduate. Go Bison.
You know.
Right. And a trusted figure in both public service and the wellness space. His work has been featured by Blavity, The Washington Post, The Fader, and Good Morning America. His Sunday trap yoga classes at the Morrow Hotel in DC regularly draws hundreds of people, and his broader offerings, go-go yoga, R&B restorative, and Black girl magic blend music, movement, and mindfulness rooted in Black culture. And I'm not done. I'm almost there. In addition to leading a team of instructors in partnerships with organizations such as Nike, Spotify, the Smithsonian, and the University of California, he continues to lead with the philosophy behind Kepara, a concept of transformation, rebirth, and rising above. And in those 3 phrases or words really resonated with me as I was learning more about you, Brandon. And so that's what we're going to focus on, that concept of transformation, rebirth, and rising above as we delve into his role as a fiscal operations specialist, explore how the federal grants he oversaw impacted the communities that received the funding, and peek behind the curtain to understand how his career ended at HHS and what options were presented to him, why he decided to leave, and what the personnel gaps will mean for federal funding. So Brandon, that's a long intro, but I wanted to make sure that people understand that federal employees are a whole 360-degree people, right?
Yeah.
They're not just federal workers that we see on the screen. Welcome to the Federal Grants Explained.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. If I had to add anything, it's father of 4, and that's like my biggest job.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was going to add that in there, but I know, but that's actually, you're absolutely right. The most important job that he has.
Is
So,
fun.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's start by explaining exactly what your role was as a fiscal operations specialist. Exactly what did you do?
Yes. Okay. So I was the person that I dealt with post-award. So I dealt with grantees, namely states, um,
Mm-hmm,
in helping them manage, not only receive, but manage their funds, ensure that they were in compliance with 2 CFR 200 and 45 CFR 75. I helped do trainings. There's a lot of turnover in government across states, especially during the time that I came in,
mm-hmm,
where I was really a team of 1 to 2.
mm-hmm,
By the end of my career, we had about 15 people on the team, but I somehow, as a new fiscal operations specialist, became the most senior person by the time I left, including the 2 levels that kind of were hired above me. Uh,
mm-hmm,
I was able to connect with states, do more customer service kind of things, and just making sure that they understood what compliance meant, understood
mm-hmm,
that they were, I'm a few months out of it. So if I miss a few
mm-hmm.
of those SF titles, excuse me.
That's okay.
They're turning in their SF 425s, which is managing the amount of money that they have. Their
Mm-hmm,
certification for the maintenance of effort, which is ensuring that states were spending the same amount of money, or at
mm-hmm,
least an average, a high above or equal to the average of the amount of money that they spent in previous 3 years. Certified that they were doing their matching and making sure that states were being helped if there were
mm-hmm,
any types of desk audits or things that
mm-hmm,
we noticed, especially in territories where they have limited resources,
mm-hmm,
places where they needed some help and some strengthening. And so I was able to kind of get my feet wet in not only just the average Title III funds that they were
mm-hmm,
given, but
mm-hmm.
also their ARPA funding, which is the American Rescue Plan, and then
Act.
the
Mm-hmm,
Act, excuse me,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
sorry. It's
Yeah.
been a minute, but the and the CARES Act, and so
Mm-hmm,
I had to manage almost over $1 billion in that time period because of the increase in funding that we received or that states received.
mm-hmm,
Ensuring that they were not only not spending everything out in the beginning, but were following a timeline of responsible fiscal spending.
mm-hmm.
And so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that was my job. I kind of did a little bit of everything until we were
Mm-hmm,
able to fill in those subject matter experts that knew, specifics when it came to, say, desk audits or when it came to training. I
mm-hmm,
was kind of the go-to guy at first for all of those things and helped build out the team that
mm-hmm.
ended up taking over and that now I believe is gone, frankly. The agency
Yeah. Yeah.
experienced a lot of change, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. So he mentioned 2 CFR 200 and 45 CFR 75. I'm going to briefly explain those, but basically 2 CFR 200 is basically where the guidance, the federal regulations that federal grantees must adhere to are codified. Now for U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, those very same regulations, but exist at 45 CFR 75, basically where the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services keeps its regulations in Chapter 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations. There are some changes between 45 CFR 75 and 2 CFR 200 because, of course, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services covers so much in public health that the standard regulations would not be sufficient. So they kept theirs at 45 CFR 200, 45 CFR 75. Another thing that he mentioned was making sure that the states, I would say adhere to their maintenance of effort requirements. I can spend some time diving into that, but I think that will take us down.
The whole class.
I can spend a lot of time trying to break
Match and all of that was that was the
cost
hardest part.
match. Yeah, but we want to focus on Brandon. So let's find out a little bit more because one of the things I like to do is to kind of pull behind the curtains understand what's happening or for others to understand what's happening at federal agencies, how they typically operate, and what has changed now that Doge has come in and made some changes. What would you say are your top three responsibilities? What were your top three responsibilities in your role as a fiscal operations specialist? You gave me a good summary. What would you say the top three?
I felt like I guess my main thing was like I said, customer service really is
Mm-hmm.
kind of how I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Managing states' expectations as far
Mm-hmm.
as what they would be able to do with funds,
Mm-hmm.
and then training. There was a lot of training that we
Mm-hmm.
had to do because there's so much turnover. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time in COVID, that alone was its own kind of
Mm-hmm.
job where not only
Mm-hmm.
were we all at home, so I can tell you, I'll tell you about that whole
Mm-hmm.
process. That's when I first came on, I went and got fingerprinted, and they
Mm-hmm.
emailed me almost immediately after and said, "Okay, we got your fingerprints. Stay out for a couple weeks. We'll have you come back in. There's like a little cough going around. And we think we'll be back in a couple weeks." I didn't walk into the office for almost 2.5 years. And
Wow.
so I
Wow.
had to learn how to communicate with states and with peers in a group that was actually newly developed. So I was in the
Mm-hmm.
Center of Management and Budget, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that was separated from the field. There
Mm-hmm.
were regional administrators that our fiscal operations specialists worked with. And those are
Mm-hmm.
people within the regions that kind of made sure that not only the fiscal side of things was taken care of for states, but the programmatic side. And so I
Mm-hmm.
had to operate as a liaison between these regional people and individual states.
Mm-hmm.
It became states for me, but the agency I was in, the Agency for Community Living, was
Mm-hmm.
also AOA, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Agency on Aging, and AOD, which is the Agency
Yeah.
for Disabilities. They were
Yeah.
together for the Agency of Community Living. So I have experience working with the disabled population as well as the aging population. So
Mm.
learning that at first and kind of creating some continuity across those programs for these states that now not only had the funds that they were awarded, but additional funds and then additional funds. And this, how do we spend CARES
Mm.
Act funding if we already are kind of struggling to spend our regular Title III funding or Title VI
Yeah.
funding?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so really kind of smoothing out the communications between these groups, and interpreting this new policy that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of made so that these funds were adequately and accurately spent. And so
Yeah.
that kind of my job shifted and morphed throughout that time.
Mm-hmm.
But it always came down for me and for the agency to being a customer service arm. These funds are mandatory, and so it's not like the discretionary grants where you're really doing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
determining as to like if you're going to receive it or if you're renewing a contract. Like every year they got these funds, and so
Mm-hmm.
helping them create systems that were sustainable was
Mm-hmm.
really a big part of the job. And so it
Mm-hmm.
always really to me boiled down to person communication, customer service. How can we make sure that this money you're going to get is being
Mm-hmm.
spent accurately? And if you had to go on like a 270 or some sort of plan where
Mm-hmm.
you needed to ask me like if you can spend the money or be reimbursed, how can
Mm-hmm.
we work to get you off of that so you're self-sufficient?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that you said that I'm hearing. There are a couple of things. Number one, your role as a federal official was to ensure that you provided the support to state grantees. So this is a good reminder that state agencies receive federal funds. In many instances, they receive a huge part of their funding from federal agencies. You then had to make sure that they had systems in place and that they were prepared to spend their discretionary funding, funding they received from ARPA, which was, so much funding. States and local government agencies received so much funding from ARPA. And then on top of that, CARES Act funding. Now, I do want to make sure that the audience understands that once the state gets the funding, obviously, you have fiscal people at the state agencies that are making sure that they are tracking various budgets from all of those different grants, tracking expenses from all these different grants, and then basically utilizing the funds sometimes within a specific timeline. And so
Yes.
they have to constantly figure out how they're going to prioritize their funding. And his role was really pivotal to helping, these state grantees do this. Another thing he said twice, which I hope you guys heard twice, was that there's a lot of turnover at state agencies, be for a number of reasons. But the fact of the matter is, it is, I guess a reality. And when you have that turnover, you constantly have to train your team, which is one of the reasons why Grants Works focuses on training. We provide training for local government agencies, state government agencies, nonprofits, because what we need your teams, and I'm sure you know this better than we do, your teams definitely need to have the ability, the capacity, and the knowledge to be able to manage the funding that we'll be receiving. And as a matter of fact, states are going to be receiving even more money if what this administration plans on doing does happen, which is, of course, to funnel more federal funding from the federal government to states, especially for the U.S. Department of Education. I do want to clarify for everyone that Brandon was a fiscal operation specifically within its administration. Tell me what the ACL's primary mission was. You did describe disability and aging, but I'd love to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, it was really enriching the lives of those affected communities.
Yeah.
Aging, what do they say? Aging is popular. We're all doing it, right?
Yeah.
And folks with disabilities have a
Mhm,
wide range of needs,
mhm,
from centers of independent living where they are
mhm,
able to be assisted in living lives that are fulfilling,
mhm,
to caregivers,
mhm,
to there's just so many people that
mhm,
eventually come into one of these groups.
mhm,
ACL and HHS in general, I think, is the largest grant making agency in the
It is.
country.
Mhm,
ACL was a big part of that, and we were a small agency.
mhm,
And so our mission was to make these funds not only accessible, but to ensure that they were spent on the populations that they were supposed to be spent on,
mhm,
in an efficient and responsible way.
mhm, mhm,
Unfortunately, these are populations that are often taken advantage of,
mhm,
populations that are often disregarded,
mhm,
and populations that are often thought of last when it comes to the importance of being innovative in space.
mhm, mhm.
And so I think that ACL had a huge mission to ensure that these populations weren't forgotten.
Yeah.
That they were um, taken care of. Right? Really, it was one of those things where I went into the job kind of expecting one thing and really
Mhm.
realized, it's like you're working with angels. Like a lot of people that
Absolutely.
really are either in that population
Mhm,
or are, like caretakers of people that are in that population. My son's autistic, and so it was
mhm,
really important to me, with being a father of a son who has a disability,
mhm,
and then having aging grandparents that I adore, like
mhm,
that, it just really felt like fulfilling work. And everybody at that agency bought into that mission, really cared about the populations that we were working with, and
mhm,
needed and wanted and ensured that, in especially a time of heightened sickness like COVID, where these
mhm.
populations were most affected, that they were getting the resources that they needed.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you made the connection between your own experience and the fact that you were able to connect your experience with the work that you did, and that people within the agency understood their mission and bought into the mission, and could identify with the mission. And I'm so glad you pointed out something that I think many of us forget, that, we're all aging. And so making sure that innovative solutions, and that's something I'd never considered. The fact that ACL was more than likely, and you can confirm this for me, there were probably grants to develop innovative ways of serving, aging populations, and innovative ways of serving the disabled community. And these are the things that federal grants fund. These are the types of projects that federal grants fund that many people are not aware of. And so glad you made that connection, for yourself, obviously, in the work that you were doing, but also for this audience that's watching this episode. Now, how would you say you typically collaborated with the project officers? And the reason I asked you to do that is because many people are not aware that typically when you receive a federal grant, you typically have a grant contact, which is a grant management officer, grant management specialist, and maybe in your role, a fiscal operations specialist. But then you also have a project or technical contact, that project officer that's overseeing and ensuring that your grant is basically accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish from a technical or programmatic point of view.
Programmatic, yeah,
Yeah.
programmatic. We would say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was the money guy. So
Mm-hmm.
we worked in in concert with program officers to ensure that the funds that states wanted to spend
Mhm.
being spent correctly. That could be as small as equipment. There
Mhm.
would be, what was it called? The process where they would have to go in, and if you wanted to spend over a certain amount of money, we had to
Mhm.
review and make sure that it was in alignment with 2 CFR 200,
Mhm.
CFR 75,
Mhm.
and then give the okay. And that could be
Mhm.
anything from you want to buy a car so that you can drive through the
Mhm.
remote parts of Arizona and ensure that
Mhm.
that aging or disabled population was being cared for, aging
Mhm.
for me by that point.
Mhm.
It could have been health systems that are $300,000 plus contracts, ensuring that you have 3 bids, ensuring that you at least 3 bids,
Mhm.
these things. It could have been in COVID, a big thing was contracts for technology so that these populations of aging folks that are already isolated and a lot of times have
Mhm.
interaction. Uh,
Yeah.
it was maybe working with the program to ensure that there is like the slip and fall program, which was really big, which is was something I did want to highlight in that agency. Is small but mighty because these populations are some of the highest at risk
Mhm.
for death. Death is a
Yeah.
big thing that happens as you get older and as
Yeah.
deal with certain disabilities. And so ensuring that we extended the lifespan of folks, say in Guam, right, or
Mhm.
in just various parts of the country,
Mhm.
by ensuring that the programs that were being paid for were being audited and making sure that we were looking back and ensuring, like with the
Mhm.
certification of the maintenance of effort, ensuring
Mhm.
that states were not just using this funding, especially the ARPA funding, as a catch-all for other things that they were doing, and not basically using this funding
Mhm.
to pay for something else.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so,
and so you're right with commingling. I think that phrase that you were looking at, basically what grantees sometimes have to do is seek prior approval from
okay.
folks like Brandon to procure a service or procure equipment. When you procure anything with federal grant funds, there's a certain process and there's a way you must document it and all of that. And these are the things again that we help our clients do. But I do want to make sure that you all again are getting the bigger picture of what his role was and how having people in his position actually prevents fraud, waste, and
Yeah.
abuse.
Yeah.
This is I'm trying to connect the dots here, folks. So,
Yeah, and I mean, that's what makes me most worried, especially with this administration that has
yeah,
looser regulation and
yeah,
is striking, huge swaths of the population with the big beautiful bill and things like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And with Doge and these kind of inexperienced,
yeah.
and frankly, I don't want to say crass, but like crass ways of doing things where it's this idea that the country is like a tech company. It's not. It's really not.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Yeah.
so many. And what's sad, because we already were struggling under Biden with COVID, that
Mm-hmm.
the like we said, turnover for people in my position, they didn't leave their jobs. And so with the shift in technology and everything going digital, you already had a huge group of the
Mm-hmm.
population that, almost like when computers came in, just weren't
Mm-hmm.
really trying to continue to go along that learning curve. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got in, right? Where it was like, I know how
Mm-hmm.
to, I kind of streamlined a lot of these operations because I'm able to email people quickly. Like I'm able to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
do things in a way that's a little
Mm-hmm.
faster. And so I was able to kind of do like my position went from 5 people to 2 to me. And
Mm-hmm.
then a director, and then we built out a team from there that they had restructured under Trump's original administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Biden came in, and we had this huge thing with COVID. And so figuring out ways to make sure that states were not only being tracked, but responsible in an automated system. We moved over to
Yes.
PMS as
Mm-hmm.
our payment management system as I came on. And so
Yeah.
before it was paper, and they were figuring out like how to scan things in, and like we were able to make it so that these forms were all digitized. It was something that
Mm-hmm.
I was able to review
Mm-hmm.
10 to, because the Title III grants are not just one grant. So it's Title
Mm-hmm.
3B, you have
Mm-hmm.
is it B, C1, C2, D,
Mm-hmm.
and E. Then we
Mm-hmm.
had Title 7 grants that were 2 grants. So it was like an 8-part grant per
Mm-hmm.
state per year with a 2-year grant period, and oftentimes an additional year for a
Mhm.
no-cost extension that they were able to use, especially with the funds that were additionally added. So it was
Mhm.
really kind of weaving through how funds from 2020 plus ARPA funds that were given in March plus CARES Act funds that were given a little later were all
Mhm.
processed. And so
Mhm.
the ability for fraud and the ability for states to just be confused, frankly,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and have these long periods where money wasn't necessarily being accounted for because they didn't have team building, they didn't have
Yeah.
there was just so many limitations that
Mhm.
we had to work through that now, especially with people coming back into the office,
Mhm.
might be being addressed. But like for unfortunately for my agency, a lot of people were fired or riffed or sent home. Uh,
Mhm.
and so those catch-alls aren't there. And so that
Yeah.
for me in the next 3 to 5 years, frankly, is the most alarming
Yeah.
possibility is that there's more money than ever. There's looser regulations than ever. We're taking planes from people. Like there's a lot of
Yeah,
things that are just
exactly.
kind of going on that
Yeah.
oversight is not there, and that
Mhm.
those years, like decades of experience that were
Mhm.
already being kind of
Mhm.
cycled out
Yeah.
are just simply not there. They're not available.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
climate of people
Mhm.
there are people like I'm on Reddit a lot, and I keep up with federal agencies through there where people are kind of able to speak more freely because it's a little
Yeah.
bit less your public
Mhm.
profile. It's
Yeah.
the panic that a lot of federal employees feel, and
Mhm.
frankly, the toxic work environment that they're in, and that
Yeah.
it's like we've become the enemy, and I
Yeah.
think that that alone has driven the once reliable government
Mhm.
it was just what it was. Like, I don't know how to
Yeah.
environment. it's
Yeah.
it's changed. It's really
Yeah.
changed. And so those
Mhm.
people and those subject matter experts, they're great people that are dedicated public servants, which I think
Yeah.
is forgotten. Is they
Yeah.
I could have made a lot more money working in grants
Mhm.
works or getting my own grants or doing things like that, but like having those dedicated people that are oftentimes a part of those
Mhm.
populations, I worry
Yeah.
for who they're going to put in and what this will look like when more funds are being pushed through less
Mhm.
regulation.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm hoping again, as I hear, I'm listening to the words, but I'm also is hearing and sensing other things. Number one, that really struck me is the fact that you were able to easily cite, number one, the different types of funds tied to the different types of, for example, I think you said Title III, and then the various sections, and that is institutional knowledge, that
Mhm.
is experience, that is and we also hear that he cared a lot about what he did professionally at the ACL, and so a lot of that unfortunately is dissipating. It's because as all of these folks with this knowledge, these subject matter experts, leave the federal agencies, sometimes what's left behind are, yes, some people who still have some of that knowledge, but sometimes people who don't, right? And so when he mentioned the next 3 to 5 years and us actually seeing the impact of what's been happening these last 6 or 7 months, that's also my own fear. I am seeing it on the other side as a consultant to recipients of federal funding. But again, he's also very aware because he's looking at this from a national point of view. So I'm so glad that you connected those dots and continue to connect the dots for us, Brandon. Now, some of the main recipients, you said state agencies were the ones that you worked with primarily. Any nonprofits, any other types of recipients that you typically worked with? And give me an example of, a project funded by a grant that you oversaw that, you find extremely important, or just something about it you need, the listeners to know and the viewers to know this is the kind of work that ACL grants funded. Just something,
Yeah,
just one example that you can think
I
of.
think that well, I could think of so many, but I think for me, what we did really, so the Title III, like we were saying, there's five different portions of that. Supportive services,
Mm-hmm.
one, home delivered meals, and congregate meals was C1
Mm-hmm.
and C2.
Mm-hmm.
Preventative health, I think was D, and then E. I'm losing it's all leaking out of my
Mm-hmm.
my ears right now. But the congregate meals and support congregate and home delivered meals for me
Mhm.
was where I could really just it worries me because these
Mhm.
populations a lot of times don't have places to eat. They can't make their own food. They cannot um do the things that they need to survive. Like it's such a basic thing to eat.
Yeah, yeah.
So in COVID especially, a lot of those fundings from, for instance, C2, which I think is the congregate meals, and C1 is home.
Mm-hmm.
It might be the reverse.
Hmm.
That funding was transitioned. So we were able to transfer funds from one pot to the other because people couldn't congregate. So it's not
Yeah,
like you can go to the, local center and get a meal. It has
yeah,
to be home delivered. So
yeah,
programs like that, where that oversight needs to be, you need to know the vendors, you need to know that it's healthy food, you need to know that the
yeah.
food isn't spoiled or that the vendor's trusted. You need to
Hmm.
figure out ways for that food to get to the person.
Hmm.
Those types of things were heavily affected or will be heavily affected by a lack of oversight where
Yes.
you people are people and federally, which is speaking to your point as to like what it is that we did. One of the things I realized when I got there was like I'm the guy. Like there's nobody above me to go to outside
Yeah,
of like a director, but my job is to be the guy. I'm the person who they have to ask. I have to say, based on regulation, of course, if
of course.
okay or not. And if
Hmm.
nobody's there to answer this question, they still
Hmm.
have the ability to go spend this money however they like. So corruption in government is not uncommon, especially in state agencies where things,
Yeah,
depending on the state, and I won't call any out, but there are plenty
yeah,
of states.
yeah.
There's some states that are very great that are bigger normally, and but even those states have places where things slip. But
Hmm.
smaller states, a lot of times there's a lot of corruption there. There's a lot
Hmm.
of just ignorance a lot of times where you know a guy, you think he's a good guy, and you want to give him a contract,
Yes.
but you have to bid. You have to make it so that it's a fair process. And so
Yeah.
with those regulations and requirements really being eroded, um,
Hmm.
it's those programs that are touch points for people that aren't,
Hmm.
like a supportive services was kind of a catch-all for things where
Hmm.
states could have more discretion. But
Hmm.
like I said, preventative health, where we're checking and making sure that people aren't falling and just being in a home. And,
Yeah, yeah.
like those types of things where you can really feel the impact when
Hmm.
states are calling and saying, hey, like we cannot get food out to these people as
Hmm.
CARES is being, squabbled over in Congress. By the
Hmm.
time that money comes, they're like, okay, thank you, we have it. We need to pay these contractors. We need to
Yeah,
do this and keep these programs going. Like that
yeah,
for me was huge because just
yeah.
as I said, food and nutrition, frankly, are
Hmm.
life extenders.
Yeah.
They make it, even just thinking about what's going on in Gaza and Palestine now, like
Hmm.
humanity is based on survival and eating, and so
Absolutely.
that was one of the things I was very proud of was just being able to ensure that these funds were delivered to states and that people I could see, especially now being back out of
Hmm.
DC, which
Hmm.
feels like a bubble. It feels like the rest of the country is just out there and you're in here.
Hmm.
But being
Hmm.
away from headquarters, being away from there, and now being back in Georgia and kind of seeing these centers of independent living in the field and seeing
Yeah,
AJ and talking to my grandma about her going to the center. I'm like, wow, I was sending money to that place, like
yeah,
that
yeah,
building, so that
yeah.
you all could have those meals. Like feeling that now makes me appreciate so much more what we did, but also
Hmm.
I have anxiety around is that money going to come and is it going to be spent correctly,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I worry about.
Man, there's so much follow up on that, but in the interest of time, I do want to just focus on three of those things. Again, number one, so I remember being a volunteer for Meals on Wheels. I remember, when my children are younger, we used to actually, go to the local Meals on Wheels in Atlanta, Georgia, and then we would drive around and deliver meals to different, sometimes to individual seniors in their homes, or sometimes to like a senior living facility. I don't know if Meals on Wheels gets funding from ACL. They probably do, but it's a potential example of a federal grant that funds programs that actually leads to, again, seniors getting the meals that they need. Number two, he mentioned, falls. And when we worked at when I worked at CDC, worked in that particular center that focused on older adult falls. So there's a whole team of
Oh,
experts.
good,
Yeah,
good on
yeah.
you. Thank you, because that's
It
huge.
is huge. It is huge. There's a whole set of, experts in the country that focus on older adult falls because, when older adults fall, sometimes they don't have the strength to get back up. And sometimes they can, I hate to say it, sometimes die from those falls. Not some, pretty often, that's the result of that fall. And then the third thing is, and Brandon, you may not be aware of this. My company was hired as a subcontractor, and we actually used to do site monitoring visits. There were,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So we
Awesome.
used to,
Yeah.
yeah, so we used to do monitoring visits for HRSA grants. So these were HRSA grants awarded to states. And you're right, some states are better than others. There was one particular state of the 16 the variables that we evaluated. I would think about, no, of the 20 variables we evaluated during the monitoring visit, I think only 16, four of them they passed.
Mhm.
16 they did not pass.
That's not surprising. I'm saying, but I'm like, it's not surprising. Some days
Yeah.
it's like they either have their I's dotted and T's crossed or they don't.
Yes. Yeah,
And they haven't
absolutely.
for a long time. And then unfortunately with mandatory grants, you feel like you're feeding the wrong thing. Like it's like so you might have to stop it. So I good on you for the work you've done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And thank you for connecting those dots to me because from a bigger perspective, it's a spreadsheet, it's millions of dollars. I don't get
Yes.
to really put my hands in it.
Yeah.
And so being at home again, I'm eager to kind of look for those opportunities
Hmm.
and learn more from you, frankly. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I'm happy that I'm speaking with you because you're connecting those dots for folks, right? That you're through your experience with your grandma, and the fact that she goes to this particular center, you're now connecting the work that you did, in DC in this agency with, the center that she attended or continues to attend in Georgia and how she benefits from that. And
Mhm.
so I'm hoping that this entire episode helps folks connect the dots. So, thank you for being, that perfect guest to kind of help us understand this. Now, I want to dive now into some of the changes that you experienced once the new administration came in, the current administration came in. What was the first sign that things were going to be different?
Wow. The election, it wasn't even because I was technically came in under Trump. He was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I came in April 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like I got hired. It takes a little while for you to get on. So I got
Yeah.
hired to him, Biden to come in,
Mm-hmm.
and then Trump. And what I noticed early on, which kind of because my whole life has shifted in the last 6 months from
Yeah.
DC to Georgia. It's a much for anyone out there worried. Please don't. It's the best decision I ever made. I'm around family. I put in my time there, and I'm happy I
Mm-hmm.
did. Uh,
Yeah.
and my wife still works federally, just in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, and so we've been blessed to be able to make the transition. But
Mm-hmm.
what I noticed was we became the enemy. He had
Mm-hmm.
talked about the swamp and all of these other things before, but
Mm-hmm.
was frankly just not a government guy, didn't know anything about these
Yeah.
things and kind of had to deal with COVID
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. And so it was realizing that the security that we had as federal employees was being threatened directly as
Mm-hmm.
a campaign slogan. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what I really felt were the sorry, his executive orders where it was just the riff possibility and the hiring of Doge, like all of that was like house is on fire. Like what is going on? Like from day
Yeah.
one, he is a boisterous person that wants to make a big splash, and so we
Mm-hmm.
being the easiest target and low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
that shakeup of I have this secure job where not only as a black man, I'm able
Mm-hmm.
to just be comfortable in a working environment. And
Mm-hmm.
so many of us were like, I had the most diverse staff, especially at ACL, of people that were in wheelchairs and that
Mm-hmm.
were in from different places. Like my entire team was from different parts of the world, let alone the
Yeah.
country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sense of community and connectedness and frankly joy that I had been able to settle into
Mm-hmm.
was shattered.
Yeah.
It was Doge and it was You guys are horrible. And it was just a lack of respect for what we were trying to do. It was seeing people not know what to do and just a sense of panic that that normally your agency was sleepy. It was just very much so we get this work done. We have a lot of money to monitor, but it's money that is going towards a cause that we all appreciate and are careful of. We make sure that these things are done. It was just a spit in the face. And so that the shift in environment was one that was so radical that it was knocking people off before the fork in the road email came out,
Mhm. Mhm.
before Doge, which is already a meme, was taken
Mhm.
seriously. It
Yeah.
it was just the entire ethos and
Mhm.
pathos of the entire agency and agencies and government and the Department of Health alone shifted. RFK being involved and
Mhm.
how he flip-flopped on the campaign trail in order
Mhm.
to get into this position. Like it was just a lot of the things that we saw that were integrity and like involved integrity
Mhm.
were just obviously not the way that things were going to happen anymore. And so
Yeah.
that shift undercut people that are in we're very government workers. I like to say a lot of people give us a hard time as like, because the jobs were secure
Mhm.
and we were given benefits and things that make it so that it's like a job you don't want to quit, and because we
Mhm.
have protections that weren't easy to just be fired and discriminate.
Yeah.
Government employees are often considered, like they said, in the swamp as lazy, or
Mhm.
really, frankly, I think there's a jealousy around the security that comes with an extremely, frankly, long process. I've personally
Mhm.
have gone through SF what 50, and like I've been background checked at least 6, 7 times. Like
Mhm.
there was so much that I had to do in order to show that I had back file taxes. I had to go
Mhm.
through and pay off tickets. Like there were so many things I had to do to be an upstanding citizen in order to maintain this position that is not considered. Like people think, oh, you got a government job, it's a good check. This is easy. And so that we were never treated that way by the previous administration. And for that to be the default, you
Mhm.
know, paintbrush that we were all painted with,
Mhm.
and people, like it was just a horrifying experience for me as a person. I'm a very active person. I had my company Kepler Wellness before
Mhm.
I got into this, and just kind of very passionately spread yoga because for me it was the easiest touch point for
Mhm.
Black people specifically to take
Mhm.
your own health journey into your hands. To
Mhm.
evolve yourself is our motto. And so I felt like I was able to do that federally, where I was more or less likely, frankly, to have picked that position up to just get a check. It was more because I was able to see where these funds were going and to see the impact that we had. And
Mhm.
for that to be what drove me towards doing less in the field for myself and my community and more in the administrative side, for that
Mhm.
to be like what was the tenor, was just something that completely changed the experience for me and for many people that had been there for decades. Like I remember when I first came in, there's a woman who was celebrating, I think, her 62nd, literally, or 57th like
Wow.
year as
Mhm.
retirement, where she came
Yeah.
in out of college in like the 70s or 60s and stayed and kind of had that as her position. That dedication not being appreciated really made it for just a toxic work environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man, Brandon is laying it out. There's so much from that. First of all, thank you for really, really explaining what that was like. And one of the things that I think people may not be aware of, and this is just my own opinion, and it's tied to very much to what you were saying, is that there is a perception by some that federal workers are like you said, they're lazy, but people need to understand federal workers are some of the hardest working people, right? I've worked at CDC. You have some of the top scientists in the world, the top policy people in the world, the top administrators in the world, the top financial managers in the world. Some of them are working at federal agencies, number one, because, maybe that's their way of giving back. But as he mentioned, there's the stability of the position, right? So you have a stable position. You're very clear about what your role is in that particular agency. And you're still able to sometimes participate in research projects if you're a scientist, or at least oversee them, right? So there are all these benefits to being a federal employee. I also want to point out that becoming a federal employee is very, very, very challenging.
Yeah.
Not just the application process, but once you're hired, there is a very extensive background check. Uh, and I remember now. So I'm so glad you brought some of those things back up. That to even get a federal position, there's a certain way you have to reconfigure your resume. There's just a very different approach to getting a quote unquote federal job, a good federal job. And so I just think that you really did an excellent job of connecting everything that you did with and everything that you experienced under the new administration, the current administration. I did also do an episode on Doge, guys. So please take a look at that. I really took a deep dive into Doge's access to not just federal employees, but the payment management systems. He mentioned the payment management system, PMS,
Mhm.
but there are other payment management systems. And so you have people with a disdain for federal workers accessing federal systems, right? I need you all to, again, see how how important it is for us to just that's an important variable to understand. So thanks for clarifying that.
Mhm.
But yeah, and I never thought about that. You guys were seen as the swamp, and so being seen as the enemy, that's never a good position to be in, right? So yeah, I really appreciate that. Did you have any personal contact with anyone from Doge? And for just a reminder, Doge stood for the Department of what? Governmental Efficiency?
Efficiency. No,
Yeah.
I did not. And I'm so happy I did. Well, I think maybe on my last day. So like I can tell you my exit story and kind of tell
Hmm.
you why, because
Yes.
for me that was the last straw. It was the
Yeah.
last straw. And the Doge thing, like my mother, I don't play in my face. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like when the Doge thing, when I heard what it was, I'm chronically on the internet, like most millennials, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
so I knew what the Doge meme was. Like I said, I'm on
Yeah.
Reddit and have watched, unfortunately, these subversive troll mentality that kind of got this administrator that put, this new president in or consistent president in. I've seen the cynicism that comes with it, and that alone as a title for an agency is a very just cynical and frankly slap in the face to what government agencies do. And then for
Hmm.
him to be considered as the basically police of agencies of efficiency, which we've seen how that has not worked, frankly.
No, no.
Um, it was I could see this around the corner. And for me,
Yeah.
like I said, as a black man in a position, like I'm always aware of my surroundings.
Hmm.
And so I could see that the protections that made a job for me, one that I could just really focus on doing the work compared to being the right person or
Hmm.
being acceptable for whoever standard outside of my work ethic and my
Hmm.
ability. I could see that that was coming to an end. So like that for me was a turning point. So by the time there was the fork in the road email, which already
Yeah.
was like, what is this? I
Hmm.
didn't take it the first time. I was very much so like, stay on the line, protect the government and da 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 da. And because I didn't believe them, I was like, there's no way that this email is going to ensure that I am adequately paid out if I decide to leave.
Hmm.
I let the deadline pass and was really just trying to decide, like, was just scared. Like, what are we going to do? I'm an entrepreneur, so I knew that there were other ways to pivot.
Hmm.
So I was considering that heavily. I had been kind of fighting myself over the 5 years
Hmm.
in the work that I kind of wanted to do. And then, but was settling into understanding, like you said, that there are plenty of government employees that have other businesses and do other
Hmm.
things and have investments. And like as a young, I was about 30 when I started, 29, I guess, when I started.
Hmm.
Um, it was figuring out that, okay, wait, I can be a multifaceted person. So I started to do that. Like I'm very well known nationally for yoga and things like
Hmm.
that, but nobody at my job knew that I taught yoga. So I kind of
Yeah.
kept it separate, just
Hmm.
trying to protect myself. And so
Absolutely.
in realizing that that was not going to be an environment that I could live in, I decided after the second time they opened up
Hmm.
what they call it, the fork in the road, the resignation. DRP is what they call it, the deferred resignation program. When that was went to court, that's when and it went to court, and Trump was really just
Hmm.
grinding people down and like, we're gonna fire you, we're gonna
Hmm.
fire you, we're gonna fire you. Like the message
Wow.
was going crazy.
Mm.
They were accusatory and just talking about how there's too much spending, and that's Doge's. They were going to cut billions of, or was it trillions of dollars, I think he said. So I just knew that they were coming for me. So I once it went through court and the court system said that, or once it went into court and they reopened it, the court
Yeah.
had to reopen it. Me and
Yeah.
my wife, it was God intervention. Me and my wife were
Yeah.
saying like, okay, we're already stressed. Like I can't tell you the fear, just general
Hmm.
fear of the life that we have 4 kids. We live in DC.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
paying quite a lot to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was just like, how are we going to do this?
Hmm.
And so we ended up praying on it, talking about it.
Hmm.
And she is very well loved at her agency.
Hmm.
And so we decided, and her career, this is her career, right? And so we
Yeah.
decided that she would stay and I would
Hmm.
take the deferred resignation. And I was like shaking, sending the one word
Yeah.
response of, okay, or I'll do it or whatever. So I did that and I literally went to sleep. Like I was so just anxious about it. I went to sleep. Well, I woke up and less than 2 hours after I had sent the confirmation that I was going to take it,
Hmm.
the courts had approved that, they had said that no, this is something legal that can happen, and
Hmm.
the opportunity was closed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I literally had to pray about it and go out on faith in stepping away, and once I did, it kind of went from there.
Okay, this is good. I'm so glad you're providing us again a behind the scenes look at your experience, and which I'm sure is the experience of a lot of federal employees that ended up, going with that option, and those that are still there. So, describe for me again. You said there is the DRP,
Mhm.
which was, resign now, we'll pay you X amount of money for the next 5 months, or we'll continue to pay you until September or something like that. There were three different options. Do you mind describing for me the different
Yeah.
options?
So
And you also mentioned a one word response, which I find,
yes.
mind blowing.
Yeah.
Describe that one word response.
Yeah, I think it was like agree, yes, or something like, or no,
Yeah.
like agreed or something. Like
Yeah.
it was the hardest like 5 letters for me to,
Yeah.
because I had spent so much time
Yeah.
trying to get into this
Yeah.
position. Like I can't,
Yeah.
I started at HHS as an intern in college and
Yeah.
kept contacts there for almost 10 years. Bumped
Wow.
into somebody who was a director and was like, "Hey, you should apply for this thing," after I had kind of just given up, and really not given up, but gone and done the other things that I did that you mentioned. And so
Yeah.
my life took me to another place that I'm happy I was able to do. But I bumped into him. I was working somewhere and he was like, "You maybe want to apply for this. This is a thing." So
Hmm.
I had to, and that still took me 6, 7 months of
Yes.
like applying and being
Hmm.
an adequate candidate in order to get hired.
Hmm.
And so I'm sorry, I'm losing. Wait. Oh, you said the three things. So the DRP, they sent a fork in the road email. It literally was called a fork in the road to everybody, a mass email
Hmm.
through OPM, which had never
Yeah.
happened. I
Yes.
kind of took over OPM and just the Office of Personnel Management. They took
Yes.
that over and sent out a mass email to me, my SES. Everybody got the same
Yeah.
email from the guy who, cleaned the bathrooms. Everybody got
Hmm.
the same email, offering you a fork in the road, saying that you can either wait for us to fire everybody or you can decide to resign early, a deferred
Yeah.
resignation. They've
Yeah.
tried to make it sound like the best deal or big deal, deals. We love deals. So they were saying that you would be able to leave the workplace. You would not have to come in, which for me was a big part of it. Like I said, I have 4 kids. My youngest this year is just going to school.
Hmm.
And that's only because we're in Georgia. In Maryland, we would have had to do daycare. And so, luckily, with these kids, I've never had to send them to daycare
Hmm.
thanks to the securities of this job. That was coming to
Yeah.
an end. The ability to, they were just basically trying to make it sound like you could go on vacation and leave. And I didn't believe that. And so
Yeah.
that was the
Yeah.
deferred resignation. That once that was approved and you had gotten into it, then you were in what I am in now, where you will be paid and receive I believe I know I'm still accumulating like time off, and so that'll be a payout by the end, but you'll
Mm-hmm.
receive payment all the way up basically to the end of the federal fiscal year, which is
Yeah.
September 30th. uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so as long as you at that point resigned, uh,
Yeah.
and so that was the main option. And then there was one, I believe, that was with retirees, like where you were able to, I don't remember the exact detail. That didn't apply to me as much. But my wife and I had decided to move. We were already kind of over the entire. For if you haven't lived in DC, I will tell you that every 4 years the city changes. Every
Yeah.
changes, and so we did not want to, if we did not have to, live under
Mm-hmm.
that administration. And so
Mm-hmm.
because we decided to move, that's why the DRP made the most sense for me.
Yeah.
It was like it's almost like I was retiring from government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's why that was the one that I took. And then, so you have those two, and then the forced one would be the RIF, or the reduction in force, where they can just say, we do not need this much staff. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to basically fire you and give you some sort of exit package. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that that is what is going on in, or what went on in my agency. Now, ACL, I don't believe exists in the same, I know it's not the same capacity that it was, but I know that my entire team, for the most part, is gone. A lot of people lost their jobs and weren't able to, that were, dedicated to holding on, did not receive the same level of pay that I have received over the last, what, 6 months now. Uh,
Yeah.
wait, April, so I'd say like 4 months, 4 to 5 months.
Yeah.
They were given an exit package based on their time being there, which from what I understand is anywhere from like $10,000 to like,
Mm.
I don't know, maybe like a little more based on their years of experience over,
Wow.
I think 10 years was
Mm-hmm.
details. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on it, but I know that
Yeah.
that's the range.
Yeah.
So it was really those three things: retire, resign, or be reduced. Uh,
Yeah.
and so yeah, those were our options, and I just decided, like I tend to take my future into my own hands.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much again for helping us understand that. So, what would you say is your primary concern for your colleagues that are still at HHS?
Really for me, it's the work environment. I think I mean, every day it seems like they come up with something to make
Mhm.
someone's day to day a living hell, frankly.
Yeah.
It's, like even, my wife is still
Hmm.
working in agency, and, so I kind of still have my ear to the pulse of what is going
Hmm.
on, although I'm not receiving the emails.
Hmm.
But now they're like going after people for like student loan payments, or going after people for like back taxes or things like that. Like just the government worker that I
Wow.
know, yeah, like they're just trying to get people out the way. And the government worker I know appreciates stability so work can get done. And so
Yeah.
I just really think for those people that oftentimes, especially at ACL and HHS specifically, relied on not only the money they were receiving, but the benefits.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I had a coworker that constantly had health issues that
Hmm.
needed the security of the job position in order
Yeah.
to be able to do the work. She's excellent at her job.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. But unfortunately was dealing with health concerns that made it so that she needed either time off, or she just kind of, some days were good, some days were bad. And so
Yeah.
thinking about her specifically, I just worry that there those protections not being there makes it so that they are slowly, and as a wellness person, deteriorating from the inside out. Uh,
Yeah.
I think about the
Absolutely.
whole person there more so than I think about the position. I do, believe that everything happens for a reason.
Hmm.
Do think that if you do leave that position, honestly, it's better in a lot of cases, if it's mentally, emotionally, and then physically draining on your life. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I just worry for those folks that had set life plan. Like for me, I had kind of settled into, I'll be
Hmm.
working at this agency at least for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Years
Yeah.
maybe, depending on where the kids go. I was able to focus on my life because
Hmm.
the job allowed for me to think in that, you know, capacity more than keeping a job and making sure that
Yeah.
getting fired. And it's like, no, I was
Yes.
able to kind of build, like we had a beautiful home in Maryland, and
Hmm.
kind of went up the ranks in our, lifestyle,
Hmm.
because we had the security. And so I just think about those people that are close to retirement, frankly,
Mhm.
those who don't have as many years as I do to kind of figure out, okay, how can I build up this 401k again, that maybe
Yeah.
don't have the resources and won't have now that pension that they would have had because they were riffed at
Mhm.
age 57, with 2 or 3 years of service left.
Wow. Yeah.
That yeah, that's what I worry about the most is those folks that are going to have to figure out how to bounce back
Mhm.
to an environment that is shrinking, you
Yeah. Yeah.
being taken over and challenged by AI and these other things.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you say that because and for the we have about three more questions, but I do want to, piggyback on something you said. I want to make sure I heard you correctly when you said that federal employees are being one of the ways that they're trying to pick people off is to challenge them about their student loan balances or taxes. Is that and
That's a
all of that
recent
is possible through with data. So there is a lot of data overlaying that seems to be happening. So you have the federal employee, and then you have data overlays about their tax status or their student loan status, and then again that's really interesting. Thanks for that insight. So, for those of you who aren't aware, you've heard him mention that ACL may not exist, or it certainly doesn't exist in the way that it did before. So, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, that is now, of course, led by RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., announced some really significant changes about 2 months ago. So I'm going to briefly summarize them here for you. So number one, their plan, I'm not sure where they are in this process, is to downsize all full-time employees from 82,000, and that's across all the different agencies across the regional offices, from 82,000 down to 62,000. They plan to consolidate redundant units, so they want to go from 28 divisions to 15 divisions. The Administration for a Healthy America, that's a new agency that's being developed, by under RFK Jr.'s leadership, that would combine multiple agencies such as the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health, HRSA, which is the Health Resources and Services Administration, SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, ATSDR. I can't remember what that stands for, but it has to do with toxic substances. That is currently at the CDC. And then another agency called NIOSH, which is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, I believe. That is also a center within CDC. So basically, they're going to merge these multiple agencies together to create the Administration for a Healthy America. They plan to reduce regional offices from 10 to 5. And then they're going to, there are quite a few other things, and I won't,
Stress
itemize
me
everything,
out.
but it's quite a bit. ACL,
Oh,
for example, I think it stands for the Administration for Community Living, will be integrated with ACF, which is the Administration for Children and
families.
Families,
Oh,
with
wow.
yeah, with another agency called that's ASPE. I forgot what that stands for. With the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, those four, yes,
Oh my goodness.
yes, they're going to be merged together. ACL will be integrated with ACF, ASPE, and CMS. That is huge. So when I say significant changes are happening at HHS, they are very significant. I do also want to explain that we're not saying that agency changes should never happen. We're not saying that efficiency shouldn't be finding services. I think the concern is the way it's being done. And I think that's what a lot of people have been concerned about, the way that the changes are being made. And again, some of us may not actually feel it for another year or so. But I think many of us are, if not all of us, are going to feel it in some way. Not necessarily the changes at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, but just the changes across the federal government landscape. We will feel it. So now that I've summarized some of those changes, what are some of your thoughts? You said, "Oh my God, I saw the look on your face." What was the first thing that came to mind when I mentioned that ACL would be integrated with ACF, ASPE, and CMS?
It's the it's like you need a scalpel and you have a sledgehammer.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
that is, I mean, yeah, I think ACF, and from what I understand, ACF and ACL, we worked directly next door to them, so we've always
Hmm.
had some communication. Um, they are different programs though. They're
Hmm.
different. They require
Yeah.
different.
Mm-hmm.
skill sets. They require different, like I just, it's like I can't even wrap
Mm-hmm.
my mind around how that much funding
Mm-hmm.
can be adequately, especially if you're reducing force by 20,000 people. I don't
Yeah.
understand how that much funding can be adequately distributed. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see how it can be adequately monitored, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how it can adequately be even returned. Like
Yeah.
I mean, and then programmatically, I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
what they're going through. Because
Yeah.
at least fiscally, what I can say, and what I often said, is
Mm-hmm.
that there are automations that could come from
Mm-hmm.
fiscal, from my job, right?
Yeah.
Was like I could see in how
Mm-hmm.
I was streamlining things that if you had the right systems in place,
Yeah.
my job needed to exist, I think, for that personal touch.
Yeah.
I could see it being something where it could be more efficient. I have no,
Yeah.
like you said, I think that was a great point. Like, I don't think that there's anything wrong with streamlining things. The government is notoriously slow. They were still using what Dell computers, and it was still kind of slow. And
Mm-hmm.
so there were ways that you could go in, small ways,
Yes.
make big changes. But
Mm-hmm.
big changes, it does not, like, that is, it's just such a simplistic way to think about things and how they should work
Yeah.
completely, and frankly how you've seen in a lot of ways, and
Mm-hmm.
the approach by this administration, this catch-all kind of, like, we're gonna just do this one thing, like the solution's obvious. It's really not. It's not. That's
Yeah.
why Doge and this meltdown with it has happened, because just going in and trying to scrub the rolls of the IRS, for instance, is not, that's not necessarily catching the right things. You don't know how these things operate unless you get into them and have those subject matter experts that are in their specific agencies doing that work. Like that
Mm-hmm.
it's an idea is different than the work that has to be done. And the
Mm-hmm.
work that has to be done takes a fine-tooth comb. It takes, interactions and speaking with these states, and speaking with these when it comes to discretionary grants, contractors, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
many across different states or regions. So like even just hearing that the regions are going from 5 to 10 to 5 is just, in my opinion, just a long shot like that. I mean, 10 regions was already, for the audience's understanding, maybe 8 to 9 states and
Mm-hmm.
territories per region.
Yeah.
And these states are
Yeah.
big. Some are New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, like all of those bunched into one. And then the
Yeah.
South is its own. And then, so like the way that North Dakota operates is not the same as the way that any other region, or that region operates is not the same as any other region. So pushing
Yeah.
them together, ideally they're in the same part of the country, but like the Northwest to the Midwest is not a region. Like that I can't even imagine how that's supposed to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. And I hadn't thought about that either. The fact that you take 10 regional offices down to five, it's almost like, yeah. So they're going to basically divide up the 50 states and territories and and smush them into five regional, I guess, five regions. And that's an interesting insight. So I appreciate that. I do also want to point out, so for those of us who are wondering how some of these changes are impacting us as either grant applicants or as awardees, is the U.S. Department of Health, well, basically ACF, the Administration for Children and Families. They have a number of grants that they release each year. This year, unfortunately, ACF released notices of funding opportunity. For those of you who aren't aware what those are basically a public notice that's a multi-page document from about 40 pages up to about 80 pages saying, this is the name of this grant. This is how much we plan on funding. These are the number of expected grantees. And it provides all the instructions that applicants need to be able to prepare really strong proposals to that particular funding opportunity. So again, that's why it's called a notice of funding opportunity. So I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but multiple ACF notices, NOFOs were released, giving people 2 weeks to apply.
What?
Yes, 2 weeks. So right now, my firm, we're actually
Oh my
applying to
goodness.
4 grants. One was due, and this is ACF and OVW, Office of Violence Against Women grants. So it's across multiple agencies. One was due on Monday, one was due yesterday, one's due today. And then the other grant's a foundation grant, but then we have another government grant due on Monday. Yeah.
That's
Well,
ridiculous.
yeah. So
These
several
programs
AC.
are generally, and I was on the
Mhm.
postal work side, so I may not speak to know folks.
Yeah.
From what I understand programmatically, that's like a
6 to 8 week.
month,
Yes.
or a week. It's a week. Okay,
Yes.
okay, okay, okay. But even
Yeah.
still, I know that grantees prepare for a very long time
Yeah.
to just put the application in. You have to have years of
Yes.
experience. You have
To
to
do it.
have a
Yeah.
track record.
Yes.
You have to have
Yeah.
all kinds of things that are in 2 weeks. Like I that's and what alarms me with this, especially with
Mhm.
the Doge perspective, is that I there's no way that they can monitor and review that many applications without the use of AI.
Yeah.
There's no, so it's like, and that's still an
Yeah.
unproven system. And then hearing the administration try to say, well, we shouldn't put limits on this, again, is this very laissez-faire way of
Hmm.
cutting a corner that is
Hmm.
going to affect Americans' lives, it
Yes.
is going to affect people. Like I
Mhm.
can't imagine. Oh my goodness. Good on you for fighting the good fight.
Actually, you know what? I see it as just sharing information. I really can only see it as sharing information because for a number of reasons. But
Well,
let's talk
I
about
mean even
you.
just in the application process. Like
Yes. Yes.
I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
empathize. I know it's a lot of work to put in those
Yeah.
applications. It's a
Yes.
lot of work, a lot of
Yeah.
research, and
Yes.
to be able to respond in the way that Grants Works has is
Mm.
just that's at
Yeah.
least some light, in this
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So grant writers, including a few on my staff, are really feeling it right now, guys. They're working late into nights
Yeah.
because they're trying to meet these deadlines, these very unrealistic deadlines. And for those of you who aren't aware, just a brief overview, and then I'm going to go into my last 2 questions for Mr. Copeland. To prepare an application is let's say 20-page program narrative describing your program. There's a budget. There's a budget narrative. There are what are called letters of support. So in other words, organizations reach out to institutions within their community for them to provide letters of support on their own letterhead. So that's 20 different institutions you're contacting for them to provide you a letter on their own letterhead and signed saying that they're going to support your application in this way or in that way. So that's letters of support. And then there are federal forms, and sometimes they have other certifications they want, and all of that needs to be done within 2 weeks. Again, that typically is 6 to 8 weeks. Some NOFOs are released, giving folks a lot of, much, maybe 10 weeks. But yeah, a 2 week timeline for an application is insanity. So, but let's move on and talk about you. What's next for you, Brandon?
That's a good question. So I
Mhm.
have been lucky to be in Atlanta where I have
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
Cost of living is very different.
Mhm.
I have a business
Mhm.
that is well loved in the
Mhm.
Atlanta,
Mhm.
and I still have business going on in DC. And
Mhm.
so I am working to flesh out all of the possibilities of that business,
Mhm.
see what I can get my hands into, see how I can really get back into the field of just teaching and talking to people, building
Mhm.
out programming, trying to adopt some of the virtual and online options of getting
Mhm.
people on the yoga mat or in a sound bath or a Pilates class or like
Mhm.
in these kind of public health facing um,
Mhm.
activities, working on
Mhm.
doing contracting myself. So learning that process of
Mhm.
getting contracts with universities and
Mhm.
corporate groups, and
Mhm.
really just taking the information that I've learned in the
Mhm.
last 5 years and how
Mhm.
grants work, uh,
Mhm.
and trying to just continue to do the work that I've always really dreamed of doing from Howard. Um,
Yeah.
I'm interested in potentially working in grants again. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Like it's really that like I said, father of four. So
Mhm.
if this isn't working, I got to figure something else out. And I like to think I'm versatile enough to do both.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
exploring opportunities to use some of the subject matter expertise that I have,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and figure out ways to maybe marry them both.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's something to be said that I could have been working at the Department of Justice, or I could have been working at
Hmm.
department. I could have been working at the Department of the Interior or something. But
Hmm.
it was the Department of Health that I
Yeah.
worked at, and at Howard when I first started to learn to do this type of work, that
Hmm.
I kind of worked my way through and got a good experience
Hmm.
in the last 5 years, and that I'm confident in representing if I were to go, say, back into the same position. But I've
Hmm.
never done things from the private side, and
Hmm.
so seeing how I can integrate some of my passions into
Hmm.
the knowledge that I have, and see where it takes me. I'm really in it. Like I said, I'm blessed, and my wife is just a huge pillar. I cannot state enough
Hmm.
her, insistence that I even apply for this job,
Yeah.
beginning, and confidence in me there, and then being able to um, take that confidence that I had and what I think my gifts are. And so I'm just excited to see kind of where this takes me in Atlanta, which is a city that has so much opportunity.
Hmm.
I'm just really excited to kind of see what happens and continue to walk in faith and see kind of what comes and be prepared to respond to it when it arrives.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, how can the audience, anyone who's listening, find out more about Kepara Wellness, your yoga sessions, and just some of the other things that you're going on? How can they find out more
Yeah, you can find
about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me, and for as this comes out, bear with me. I am still transitioning. Like my LinkedIn is not, it's still HHS. I haven't actually left. I'm
Hmm.
my it's July, so I still have
Yeah,
August, September, and so
yeah.
I'm still transitioning and really frankly taking time to kind of recover and
Hmm.
understand this new landscape that I'm in. But I do have a website that they
Hmm.
can reach out to. Or you can reach me on or through and see what kind
Hmm.
of things that we're doing in the areas that we're in. That's keperawellness.yoga, KHEPERA wellness.yoga. You can reach me there. Social media and just me as a person, I'm very much so online. And so I love word of
Hmm.
mouth and making personal connections. So if you reach out to me through a LinkedIn, or if you go through my Instagram, which is something that we use a lot through our studio page and my personal page, my email, phone number, and stuff, I'm sure will be kind of easily accessible. Just Brandon
Hmm.
Copeland, Googling Brandon Copeland yoga will show you not only some of the things that I have that I think you should, as a viewer, get
Hmm.
involved in. I have yoga classes on
Hmm.
YouTube,
Hmm.
and really touch points that you can put into your everyday life. But I'm
Hmm.
always looking for opportunities to bring this energy and not only my personal, brand of trap yoga and yoga classes, but my
Hmm.
company's brand of wellness classes. We do a lot of sound bath. We do
Hmm.
curated experience that could include retreats for like C-suite partners. We
Hmm.
we set up wellness programming in institutions like universities, like I said, in
Hmm.
corporate groups. So really just trying to have a big footprint throughout really the Southeast at this point, but the rest of the country. I'm actually headed up to New York in the next couple of weeks to set up something up there. So trying to kind of bring that energy of self-care, healthcare, nutrition focus, and um, just the passion that you can evolve yourself and you can take your own
Hmm.
life into your own hands and your own health journey into your
Hmm.
hands. Like that is my mission and vision over the next, 5 to 10 years, is to really have that stamp of our business being the leader in not only Black wellness, but wellness for professionals across the country.
So one of the things that I want, I'm hoping that the listeners were able to hear in this conversation is number one, how much you actually impacted the state grantees, the kind of support that you provided, the training, and how, unfortunately, that knowledge has left the building, so to speak. But to, provide other options and other solutions through Kepro Wellness and through the programs that you plan on providing to universities and to C-suite individuals. So if you guys are listening and heard about the amazing work he did when he was at ACL, he can come and more than likely do the same thing at your company as well. So please reach out to Brandon Copeland. We will definitely link his LinkedIn, which he did say, of course, is still, reflects his previous role at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We will, of course, link his website, his Instagram, and any other information that he shared with us, so you can follow up with him directly. So, Brandon, I do thank you so much again for really helping us understand what was happening as a federal employee, helping us understand the choices that you were given, and also helping us understand the connection between federal grants and the impact on the ground, something that I really care quite a bit about. So you've given new voice and new perspective to that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me share. This was more therapeutic than anything because it feels like this story never gets told.
Mhm.
And so I thank you for your platform and for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So that's the end of this episode of Federal Grants Explained. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brandon Copeland. If you'd like to learn more about Brandon's company, Kepera Wellness, please visit keperawellness.yoga. That's KHEPERAWELNESS.YOGA. You can also find his work right here on YouTube under the name Brandon Copeland. I'll link it below, and of course, you can find his company on Instagram using the handle Kepera Wellness. If you found this video valuable, please do 3 things. Press the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends and colleagues. If there's a particular topic you'd like me to cover or a person you'd like me to feature, please drop your suggestions in the comments. I am open to, and I do read your feedback. Also, check out the links to the description below to learn about GrantsWorks and GrantsWorks Academy, including the Federal Grant Funding and Management Training Series. As a reminder, this training helps you better understand federal grants, how to apply for federal grants, how they're awarded, about some of the systems used by federal grantees, and about grantees' audit, reporting, record retention, monitoring, and budgetary responsibilities. Again, I'm Patrice Davis. Thanks for watching this episode of Federal Grants Explained. Until the next video, goodbye.